What was the dumbest thing you thought as a child? I used to think my mom was such a good shopper. She would pick out all these groceries, and when she got up to the checker, she would only give them one piece of money, and they would give her several pieces of money back, and we got to keep the groceries. That man was so dumb, Mommy, you gave him $100 bill, and he gave us back 3 $1 bills. Grandparents were assigned to families. Like, I didn't know my grandma was my dad's mom. Same, I remember asking my mom, why did Uncle Greg call grandma mom? One of my nephews burst out with, your cousin's mom. At Christmas. He's like 7. No idea what was going through his head. My sister and I told my nephew that we were sisters and he just kept going, no, you're not. Mind was blown further when we told him Grammy was both of our moms. LMAO. We got to do it again with my niece, same reaction. Your mom's sister? I think she was more confused because she's the only girl with 3 brothers, so having 2 girls be sisters confused her a lot. I don't know what I thought, but I remember being at my great-grandmother's funeral and asking my mom why my grandma was crying. When she replied she is sad because her mother died, I was like head explodes, so that's why we had to go visit her all the time. I just assumed she was this random old lady, and I didn't like to visit her because I couldn't be my rambunctious chatty little 4-year-old self. My mom is a shusher. I then had to ask about all of our other relatives. Own 2 credit cards and use them to pay for each other for infinite money. Depending on your age at the time, that's actually a pretty good understanding of credit cards for a kid. Incorrect, sure, but better than most kids understand it. Honestly, I've seen adults with a worse understanding. I knew someone who thought she could just buy whatever as long as she could make the minimum payment. I think this is mostly the school's fault. As I look back on my history, they taught about it just basically mentioning it as you're younger, but not really explaining it. Just that it was a network of connections for freed runaway slaves could get to the north. Thus leaving much up to the imagination of young kids. Then by the time you actually learn about it, mid-junior high, your opinions are already formed. But then, if you have a good teacher, they explain that it really isn't a railroad but just known hideouts and people willing to protect them. I remember clearly a teacher stopping and saying, this is not a railroad, it is a system of safe houses and places. There is no train, no conductor, no tracks. Seems like he ran across this many times before. I totally thought that Harriet Tubman was a railway conductor, but a total badass conductor, fighting off slave owners, throwing them off the train, jumping from car to car. When you have a baby you have to push one of your testicles out, and it became the baby egg. I had no idea how I was my parents' 3rd child. I was my daddy's 3rd testicle. The inside of my stomach was another village with their own villagers. Every time I drank, it rained. Every time I ate, it fed the people. A tummy ache was because the villagers were unhappy. Hey, that's the gut bio me. I was vaguely aware of a TV show called Ironsides about a lawyer in a wheelchair. Whenever I heard the word paralegal, I thought it meant a paraplegic lawyer. It made sense to me that people in wheelchairs could make excellent lawyers based on the nature of the job and their physical limitations. I thought paralegals were lawyers who'd parachute to the scene of a crime so people would have their story straight before the cops showed up. Like paratroopers. That is an amazing image. Especially if they're already in wheelchairs. I used to believe that night is brought about by clouds, dark ones, of course. Never felt the need to clarify this with anybody, it was an obvious fact. I used to think trees made wind. Trees move, wind happens, can't explain that. My parents gave me a book about the birds and the bees that was illustrated. They showed a couple in bed in the missionary position. In that same book, there was a picture of a man's erect penis, which was shown as parallel to the floor as he stood. The book didn't explain that the penis is somewhat flexible. There was a diagram of the vagina and uterus, but no picture showing the naked woman. I didn't have any sisters and my parents weren't the kind of parents that walked around naked or semi-naked. Clothed at all times. For the longest time I thought I was deformed. My vagina was between my legs when those pictures made it look like it should be on my stomach. I was horrified and I would scream if anyone opened the bedroom door while I was changing or using the bathroom because my deformity would be discovered. I literally had the exact opposite but complementary issue. Mom told me that the vagina was just under the belly button, which would mean my penis would have to be parallel to the ground if I was standing up. But it would point straight at my chin. So I thought I had a messed up one and would never get to have sex. Spent hours trying to force it down straight. Probably did some damage. Thanks, Mom. Oh. See? We weren't alone in our genital confusion. That babies were inside their mom's literal belly. If she swallowed a cherry tomato whole, I thought it would land and bounce on the baby's head. That's adorable and terrifying all at the same time. Adorifying. That sperm were the size of your fist, squeezed their way out of your penis while you were sleeping if a girl was in the bed with you, and wiggled their way up inside her to conceive the baby. This was based on Facts of Life pop-up book, where the sperm were that size. Really terrible reading skills, and parents who wouldn't directly answer my questions just gave me the book, so I figured they were to scale. If babies forced their way out of women at the end during birth, which TV had taught me, I figured maybe nature was balancing the scales by having one of those bastard sperm tennis balls squeeze its way out of the man to begin the process. I knew babies came about by sleeping with each other, I just didn't know how sleeping could do it, and I filled in the gaps. Now I'm imagining millions of sperm fists coming out of a guy's dick as a crazy ninja move in some weird anime. I remember watching the movie Cocoon with my grandparents. I could not have been more than 4. For some reason I deduced that in order to become adults, children had to die in these pool cocoons and be reborn old. I freaked my cousins out and had a whole group of kids crying at a holiday party over our impending doom. Ruined Christmas pictures that year. Are you by chance a caterpillar? That if you drink while peeing you'll keep peeing until you stop drinking. I used to believe that people that spoke other languages translated their language to mine in their head. Oh my god. I thought for years that French people thought in English but translated things in their head before they said them. I just assumed speaking French was as difficult for them as it was for me. I went to French classes from age 4. It wasn't until I was probably 11/12 and really thought about it that I realized they think in French. Even now I put probably think in French, like seriously, I'm almost 30 and I'm not sure it's sunk in yet. I thought that there would be a baby inside every girl's stomach as soon as she is born, and inside that baby's stomach too, there would be a tiny baby. The cycle goes on and that the baby keeps growing as we grow, and after getting married the doctors will cut the stomach and take the baby out to make space for another baby. That if April was a month, Ninja Turtles must also be a month. Clearly this one by logic is true. Lousy Leonardo weather. My uncle is a priest for an obscure Hindu offshoot religion, and he told me quite young that I shouldn't play sport because each person only gets a set number of breaths in their life, and getting out of breath used them up quicker. I used to spend hours laying in bed trying to make my breaths as long and slow as possible. In fairness, I actually have a decent lung capacity as an adult, so maybe it had a positive effect. I've also heard people have a limited number of heartbeats, so you shouldn't exercise. There is some scientific backing in that. For many animals, there is some constant-ish number of heartbeats observed, meaning that small animals with quicker heartbeats have shorter lifespans and larger animals with slower heartbeats have longer lifespans, but the total number of heartbeats for both species is roughly equal. I forget the exact number. Humans, however, seem to not fit this rule. I do like this theory though because it actually is a good argument for why you should exercise. Regular exercise lowers your resting heart rate, and you are resting much more often than not, so having an overall lower resting heart rate in theory could mean fewer overall heartbeats, meaning longer lifespans. So people who believe this as a reason to not exercise are wrong in multiple ways. People that died in movies really died. I was watching a movie with my dad wherein the main character had his arm cut off. I turned to my dad and asked, "That's fake, right?" And my dad, very sincerely, said no, that actor's getting paid a lot of money to have his arm cut off. And all the color drained from my face and I said, "Oh. Okay." I was in my early 20s when I had that aha moment where I realized he was messing with me. I felt terrible as a kid to eat. I wouldn't eat in front of people, and every meal I would find myself thinking poor food getting eaten because I was convinced they had emotions. I anthropomorphized everything as a kid. I also felt bad for the food I ate and for stepping on grass. The worst was stuffed animals. I remember we had a Christmas thing at school in first grade in which everybody brought a gift and then the teacher drew numbers to see who would get to pick the next gift. There was a huge Cabbage Patch tea set that all of the girls were drooling over, including me. Well, my number was called first, but I skipped the tea set and picked this dirty old teddy bear because I could not stand the thought of him sitting there watching as everything else got picked before him. When I was a young kid, maybe between 5 to 9, my dad took me to the tiny grass runway airport in my town, and we went on a short plane ride in a small Cessna around the valley. My dad sat in the back, and I was up front with the pilot. While we taxied off the ramp and out to the runway, I was given permission to move the yoke. I thought I was steering the aircraft the whole way. I told my mom that I taxied the plane. In school I told my class that I taxied the plane. In fact, it was so strong a memory that I grew up remembering the memory without evaluating the experience. I was home on leave from a naval aviation squadron when I was talking about that flight with my dad, and I was thinking about it. And I had this long pause. And I said, "Holy crap, Dad, I just realized that I wasn't steering that Cessna." My father laughed his ass off. If a man kisses a woman for a long time, the woman is pregnant. This one's actually true. It happened to my brother's coworker's best friend's sister's nephew twice. That the world actually used to be black and white like it was in old movies, and even asked my mom what it felt like when all the colors suddenly appeared. I used to ask my dad if the color pink was around when he was young. No, kid. It came out in 1984 with the first Mac. That if you poked your belly button too hard, then it would come open like a plug and all of your internal organs would spill out. Technically, won't that happen if you poke really hard? No, there is mesentery holding the tissue in place. Something may herniate out, and more importantly, you would be prone to some crazy infections. It'd be very abnormal and concerning if all of your organs started spilling out. When I was really young, I was convinced I was pregnant. I'm a man, by the way. With a baby cat named Bridget. My family decided to see how long I would believe this, so they never told me how ridiculously impossible it was. I went on believing it for about 5 months. That's how long little me thought cat pregnancy lasted, and then when the baby never came, I went to my mom and asked when Bridget would be born. She finally told me that boys can't get pregnant and humans can't give birth to cats. I was traumatized. Little me was so excited to be a cat father, and then it was ripped away from me. I was such a stupid kid. Not something I believed, but a harmless prank I used to play on my kids. There is a highway we use that has several long, gentle curves over a 5 to 6 mile stretch. One day when my younger son complained that the sun was in his eyes, he was about 3 at the time, I had the idea to pretend that I had a personal relationship with Mr. Sun. I saw that the highway was going to curve, so I had a conversation with Mr. Sun explaining the situation and asking him to please move over so that he wasn't shining in my son's eyes. I drew out the conversation and timed it so just when Mr. Sun agreed, we would start the curve, and it looked like he was moving over and out of my son's eyes. Then after another curve, the sun would be in my other son's eyes, so I asked politely for Mr. Sun to move again, just as we went around the next curve. This went on for almost a year before my wife explained to them what was going on. It was hilarious in the meantime. That a blowjob meant you blow air in a boy's general direction. Thanks to my older siblings for making me believe that one. LOL. I knew it was more than in a general direction, but I did think the phrase was fairly literal. Poor first boyfriend. I believed hamburger and hot dog buns were only available for restaurants, not civilians. Mom used sliced bread, toasted to obliterate the gums, at home to make burgers and hot dogs. I believed that until the age of 10. I used to think adults were in full control and knew exactly what they were doing. I recently had my first child, and I cannot stop thinking about how much she relies on me to know what to do, and I really have no clue. I still feel like a kid, but now I'm a dad and it's so crazy. I do absolutely love being a dad though. I had a rough childhood and a bad father, so I'm so excited to redeem my childhood by making hers amazing.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Reddit stories. Mothership will be glad with you.